on the nice romantic evening he gave you the prenup papers?
That is a woman, looking directly into the camera, with the flat, composed delivery of somebody reading a legal citation, informing the audience, the franchise, the producers, her mother-in-law, her God, and whatever future divorce attorney is already saving the clip, that if her husband does not give her a baby before she turns 40, he is going to pay. Not in the metaphorical sense, in the sense that it is in the contract.
I think it took her by surprise to see a new woman in Bilal's home who is now becoming the woman of the household. I realized that this prenup is big business,
And that is her husband, who, before the wedding, picked her up from the airport in Kansas City after she had flown in from Trinidad to meet him for the engagement trip, in a beat-up minivan, and drove her to his mom's house, which he was pretending was his own, to see if she would leave him for not being rich. A prank. He called it a prank. It was not a prank. It was a job interview.
I had about love are starting to shrink and get smaller and smaller. Or I should say more realistic, because I still believe in love and the beauty of it, but
Okay. Shaeeda Sween, Trinidadian, professional yoga instructor, late 30s by the time the show starts. Articulate in a way that the franchise is not used to. She speaks in complete sentences. She speaks in complete paragraphs. She speaks in the cadence of a woman who is given presentations. Bilal Hazziez, Kansas City, real estate broker, Muslim, previously married, father of 2. Meet Shaeeda, proposes after 7 days in person, flies her to Kansas for a pre-K1 engagement trip. That is the setup. 2 episodes in, he has run the minivan gambit.
Play games today.
Shaeeda and Bilal's ex-wife, Shaeeda, have an intense conversation about Shaeeda signing a prenup.
I feel completely.
And here is where the show accidentally gives us the receipts. Bilal's ex-wife shows up. Not a cameo, a confrontation. Bilal's ex-wife corners Shaeeda at a gathering in Bilal's own circle while Bilal is present and proceeds to press Shaeeda about the prenup. Specifically, she wants Shaeeda to know what the prenup looked like from her side of the previous marriage, which is a remarkable move, uninvited in Bilal's space. And it is remarkable because it is telegraphing to the newest bride the specific flavor of the previous.
To be quite honest, I have to think about it. Like, I'm not sure if I'm going to sign that prenup.
Anywhere in that prenup agreement has anything about children that you and me have?
And Shaeeda, who had been going along with the prenup until this moment, looks at Bilal's ex-wife, looks at Bilal, and decides to do something the franchise had not seen a bride do before. She amends the contract. She says, I will sign your prenup on one condition. The condition is a baby by 40 clause. If you, Bilal, do not give me a child before my 40th birthday, the prenup is voided in my favor. That is the counteroffer. That is legal creativity. That is a woman from Trinidad sitting at a Kansas kitchen table and outdrafting her fiancé's lawyer using the raw material of her fiancé's own legal instrument.
They take the kids outside and Shaeeda gives everyone a course in yoga.
Are you hearing how peaceful the wind sounds? So peaceful.
I want you to understand the full absurdity of this. Bilal drew up a prenup designed to protect his premarital assets. Shaeeda used a prenup to lock down a reproductive timeline that her husband could not, even in the event of divorce, renege on. A prenup that was meant to be a shield became a compliance document. Bilal asked her to sign a protection for his cash. She signed a protection for her fertility. Those are different contracts, and only one of them was on the table before the ex-wife walked in. And here is where I want to pause and appreciate, because nobody does, that this is the most legal marriage 90 Day Fiancé has ever aired. Most of these couples don't have contracts. Most of these couples don't have attorneys. Most of these couples are pitching their marriage on vibes and a Western Union account. Bilal and Shaeeda have paperwork. They have clauses. They have counter clauses. They have an ex-wife, a witness, called in to give prior testimony on how the paperwork performs in practice. This is a marriage that would survive a deposition. This is a marriage that has in fact been conducting its own from the moment the ring hit the finger. Now pivot, because the best angle on this marriage, and I have read every Reddit thread, I have watched every clip, is not about the prenup. The prenup is the evidence. The thesis is about the minivan.
Solid choice. Shaeeda's not upset, and she's the one getting suspected of being a gold digger.
The prank. The minivan prank. Because on its face, the prank is played for laughs. Bilal is a prankster. Bilal likes a bit. Bilal fancies himself a jester in his marriage. Bilal is testing Shaeeda's love for him. That is the on-camera framing. That is the cute version. The actual version is, Bilal is a 40-something man with a failed first marriage behind him, who is about to enter his second marriage, and the only way he can imagine opening the new relationship is with a test. Not a conversation, a test. He does not ask Shaeeda if she would still love him if he were not wealthy. He stages a fraudulent poverty scenario at an airport to see how she reacts. That is not a jealous husband. That is a man conducting a controlled experiment on his own wife, inside a marriage he has not yet had.
Well, I have a life in Trinidad. I'm very known in my community.
And Shaeeda, because Shaeeda is Shaeeda, retaliates. She takes Bilal on his Trinidad trip through one of the worst neighborhoods she can find. She tells him, essentially, this is where I grew up, keep up. That is a reverse prank. That is the move of a woman who has clocked exactly what Bilal was doing and is, with stunning symmetry, informing him that if we are going to play this game, we're going to play it evenly. Bilal has no idea that Shaeeda has returned the serve. He thinks he's the jester. He's not. He's the person the jester is pranking. And Shaeeda does not tell him. She never tells him. That prank is never confessed. That prank is still, as far as Bilal is concerned, a real tour of her childhood neighborhood.
Honestly, I don't even know where her mindset is. She tends to be a little bit argumentative over some of the smallest things. She's distant, which also makes me even more wary.
And then comes the kitchen fight. Because Shaeeda's best friend visits from Trinidad, and Bilal, in a move that is simultaneously astonishing in its misread the roomness and perfectly in character, begins to lecture Shaeeda's friend in Bilal's own kitchen about how Shaeeda ought to be raising her own child, should she have one. The friend, a woman who is there as emotional support, watches this happen and responds with the exact level of bewildered disbelief it deserves. And Shaeeda sits there with her hands folded in a position I would describe as lawyer taking deposition notes and says nothing. Because she does not need to. Because the friend is going to report this scene back to Trinidad, where Shaeeda's entire support network lives, and the scene will be narrated in retelling for years. The friend is not there as a friend. The friend.
And getting a better gist of who she is, my perspective has changed.
I have a life in Trinidad. I'm very known in my community.
And I want to name what that tells us about Shaeeda, because this is where the whole portrait comes into focus. A woman who imports witnesses is a woman who has already decided the marriage might fail, and she is from day one building the record. That is not pessimism. That is preparation. The men who marry women like Shaeeda, women who are quiet, articulate, organized, witness importing, do not, as a rule, realize until the divorce that they were married to someone who took notes. Bilal has no idea the scene in the kitchen is being archived in his wife's head, annotated with a friend's eyewitness testimony, cross-referenced against the ex-wife's prenup warning, and stored in the mental Dropbox labeled, "In case of emergency." Bilal thinks he is winning an argument about how to raise hypothetical children. He is actually being entered into evidence.
Not like myself. I don't feel like we're vibing. We're on that level. I mean, we have some pretty big issues, like prenup and baby talk. You know, it's just.
And this is what I mean when I say Shaeeda outlawyered him. Bilal has been running a personality that is structured around testing. Testing her commitment with the minivan. Testing her patience with the prenup. Testing her deference with the kitchen monologue. Shaeeda, calmly, methodically, imports her own witnesses, drafts her own clauses, and logs her own reverse pranks. She does not argue. She does not scream. She never once, in the entire run of the show, raises her voice past a conversational register. She is, structurally, building her case. Okay, second pivot.
The reality is, like, marriage is, yeah, you have love component for sure, but you also have a business component as well, too. And so when people don't talk about finances,
Because the baby by 40 clause, which was introduced as a bargaining chip, which was introduced as comic relief, which was the single funniest thing Reddit made memes about for the entire season, turned into, in real life, 2 miscarriages and an enormous amount of off-camera grief. And I want to stop the roast for a minute and name that, because Shaeeda is a real woman and the clause she wrote was not a joke to her. And the losses between the clause and the baby were not a TV plotline. Rainbow baby Ayan was born December 14th, 2024. That child was waited for, fought for, cried for, and I don't want to editorialize too far, but won in court.
Okay.
I would love to hear Bilal's explanation to why he didn't set up a meeting for them.
Are you good?
And this clip, this is the one I want you to sit with. Because Shaeeda, in confessional, visibly composing herself, says, quote, "I was holding back so much things I wanted to say." And the edit cuts away because the franchise does not know how to handle quiet power. The franchise is set up to film spouses screaming at each other on balconies. The franchise cannot film a woman running a case file in her head. That clip is the whole show. That clip is the thesis. That clip is what I would print on the poster if I were producing the Shaeeda and Bilal documentary that this franchise did not know how to make. Now, zoom out. Because I want to land the argument. The Reddit consensus is split on Shaeeda and Bilal. Half the sub thinks she's a gold digger who engineered a reproductive clause to extract resources. The other half thinks Bilal is humiliating her in public and she should leave. Both takes are surface reads. The actual read is more interesting, and it is this. Bilal is a man whose entire personality is a sealed envelope with the words, "Are you sure you love me?" on the front, and he hands the envelope to every woman he dates. And the test inside the envelope keeps escalating until they fail. Shaeeda is the first woman who, upon receiving the envelope, did not try to pass the test. She instead wrote her own clause in the margin, signed it, and handed the envelope back.
New woman in Bilal's home who is now becoming the woman of the household.
Maybe, maybe not. I honestly think this is just a very unique situation they are all in, and Shaeeda is working.
To be fair, walk back, Bilal is not a monster. Bilal is, by all public accounts, present in his children's lives, financially responsible, a generous stepfather to the kids from his first marriage, and in a quiet season 3 scene the franchise barely aired, a devoted husband to Shaeeda during the hardest months of the miscarriages. He is not evil. He is frightened. He is a man who is terrified of being chosen for the wrong reasons and who has built a personality around checking for the wrong reasons before the right reasons can even show up. That is not villainy. That is a trauma response. It is also not Shaeeda's job to absorb it. And the thing I keep coming back to, because this is the lesson that the franchise keeps trying to teach us and we keep refusing to learn, is that Bilal's behavior on day 1 was the entire personality. The minivan was not a bit. The minivan was a disclosure. Bilal was showing Shaeeda in the first 12 hours of meeting her in person that he was a man who would need to be reassured, repeatedly, that he was loved for reasons other than his bank account. That is useful data. That is information every future conflict in the marriage would echo. Shaeeda had it on day 1. She could have turned around at the Kansas City airport, gotten on a flight back to Port of Spain, and saved herself several years and 2 miscarriages. She did not. She stayed. And staying is the choice I cannot defend for her, because staying, knowing what she knew, is a choice with a price, and the price was eventually paid.
Yeah, it seems kind of, I don't know, if he thinks you're after his money or something.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's because you're from the Caribbean.
Bilal's prank was a confession. He told Shaeeda on the first day that he was a man who would test the people he loved. Shaeeda heard the confession. She understood it. She signed the prenup anyway, on her own terms, with her own clause, on her own timeline. That is not a woman who got scammed. That is a woman who read the contract, noted the risk, priced it in, and bought the asset at.
What do you think about us doing something like yoga?
He handed her a beat-up minivan and asked if she still wanted him. She said yes. She then, calmly, quietly, over 3 seasons, drove that minivan home. And if one day the marriage ends, and I am not predicting that it will, because right now, as of this recording, Shaeeda and Bilal have a baby named Ayan and a life that is, by every public measure, intact. But if one day it ends, Shaeeda is going to walk out of that marriage with the same quiet composure she walked into it with, and her lawyers are going to be thrilled because she has been taking notes for years. In a kitchen in Kansas City, surrounded by witnesses, in a handwriting Bilal was never allowed to read. If you made it this far, you either love me or you're looking for something to yell about in the comments. Either way, like, subscribe, and tell your sister.